Alright. So since Devil wanna play with me this morning, I made a whole video about a topic that had been on my heart for a while, and Devil wanna play with me, and all of a sudden my phone act like it ain't never worked before, so we're just gonna redo it. Period. Basically, the title of today is Training Ground. The story is based off of Moses. Period. We love Moses. We love Moses. Well, I do. I like Moses' story. The devil be thinking he applying some pressure, y'all. He don't want no smoke. I'm trying to figure out a way I can get this to stop. I hope this ain't in the way. Alright. Okay. So this is based off the word, of course. Inspired by a sermon that my pastor preached, and I put the name of the sermon here so y'all can go check it out. And I think I also listened to a podcast. I want to say I did. I'm not sure, but I might have listened to a podcast on it as well. But the title of this is Training Ground. Let me go. So get your Bibles out, and turn to Exodus. We love Exodus. Alright, so Exodus 3, and I'm going to be reading a little bit out of 4. And, alright, so Moses at the burning bush. Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the desert and came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and the bush burnt with fire, but the bush was not consumed. So Moses said, I will now turn aside and see the great sight while the bush is not burnt. Okay, I actually have notes on this that I'm going to tell y'all because they is a word for real, and these notes are inspired by the sermon my pastor preached. So I'm gonna read a few out of here. Alright, so about the bush not burning, I wrote, based on the sermon, be a bush that burns but is never destroyed. And also, let me continue reading. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him from out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Moses' response and recognition leads to revelation and calling on his life. I do want to add that when it comes to this part, if we were referring back to the sermon, I don't remember if he applied that note to this part of the word, but I still am not going to edit it out. I'm going to still keep it in because at the end of the day, your response to God calling you and calling your name and calling you to something, your response matters. So, yeah. The way Moses responded and recognized leads to a revelation and calling on his life. Okay, stay tuned. He said, this is God saying, he said, you know what I just noticed? I love that. Okay, so look at my Bible. Never mind. When it says, and he said, when Moses speaking, the word he is lowercase. And when God is speaking, oh, never mind. Well, I think it is like that. Yeah. Is the word he is capitalized. I don't know. Stuff like that just make me happy. But anyways, God said, do not approach here. Remove your sandals from off your feet, for the place of which you are standing is holy ground. Don't miss the significance of a place you're in because you're too focused on the insignificant. It's even better than the first video. How about that, devil? Alright, so now don't miss the significance of a place you're in because you're too focused on the insignificance. 2020, 2021, I spent a whole lot of time in the pits, in the waiting, going through storms, going through trials, constantly at war with the enemy. But that reminded me that that shouldn't be my main focus, because even through that, tons of growth, a whole book was birthed out of those moments. Deliverance, healing, restoration. God did that all while I was in that place. So don't miss the significance of a place. Don't miss how important a place is because you're too focused on the insignificant. Don't miss how important where you're at now because of the bad side of things, because of because of what you're going through. It would be one thing for me to look back on that moment and be like, oh, I hate that moment because I went through so much. Family issues, everybody hated me, everybody mistreated me. But instead I can look back on it and now and say, God, thank you. And I'm pretty sure I was thanking him in that moment as well as I went on to learn. But I can look at it now still and be like, God, thank you. Thank you for those moments, because regardless of what I was going through, you were still working in the bad. Your light was still shining in the darkness. The darkness cannot overcome it. Like, even in those moments where I felt like I was fighting every day, not getting a break, God's light was still shining through it, and good still came out of it. Everything is working out for your good. Don't miss the importance of where you're at. Don't miss the importance of your holy ground, of your training ground, and what God is teaching you in it, because you're too focused on the things that aren't important. Alright, let me keep reading. Basically, yeah. So that's another thing. I'm going to finish that. So, let me not me closing my Bible, like, girl. Alright, so let me finish reading and then I'm going to explain the rest. Alright. And this is Exodus 4, by the way. I'm going to skip a little bit. And Moses answered. Basically, if you don't know the story of Moses, I'm encouraging you to go read Exodus. And encourage you to read, to watch the sermon as well and take your own notes. But I'm encouraging you to go read Exodus. Basically, God was calling him to do something, and he didn't think that he could do it. He didn't think that, Alright, so just listen. Exodus 4. And Moses answered and said, but they will not believe me, nor listen to my voice. For they will say, the Lord has not appeared to you. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a rod. He said, throw it on the ground. And he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. Then Moses fled from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, put forth your hand and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand. This is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. The Lord said furthermore to him, now put your hand in your bosom, is what I think that is. I'm not sure, but he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, his hand was as leprous as snow. He said, put your hand in your bosom again. So he put his hand into his bosom again and brought it out of his bosom, and it was removed like his other flesh. If they will not believe you, no listen to. So that goes into God just, providing. And I'm going to read my notes and I'm going to explain why that's important. I wrote, no matter what, God chose Moses, even if Moses didn't want to accept that. God provided Moses with everything he needed in order for him to do what he was called to do. Literally. I watched something, and I can't remember if it was the podcast, if it was a podcast that I watched, or was it out of a sermon. It's just like so much from I've gotten so much revelation off of this one word, but she was talking about how it's in you. That's another, okay, the topic. All right, you gotta stay on topic tonight. Do not despise where you're at now. Do not despise the holy ground. Do not despise the training ground. Holy ground is training ground. Okay, holy ground is training ground. Holy ground, where you're at now, is training ground for where God is taking you, for where God is calling you, for where you're at now. Do not despise it. Even if you feel like you've just been in this space and you feel like you've been in this pit. I got a whole testimony about the story of Joseph. I love the story of Joseph. Like, even if you feel like you've been in this pit and you've gone through so much, just like I was saying earlier, like I was going through so much, don't despise that place. Don't despise that place. It was holy ground. It was training me for where I am now. It was training me for where God is taking me. It was training me for where God is calling me to be. So that's another thing. And to lead off of that, don't despise holy ground, training ground, because it's preparing you for where God is taking you, and everything you need is in your hand. Everything you need is in you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really need y'all to go watch that sermon. But like, he was saying like how Moses, I think from, let me pause this and go read and make sure. All right. Y'all can call me dumb for not knowing, for not being sure about this. But one thing about me, I have a whole lot of humility, and I can tell somebody if I'm not sure. But this rod is what Moses had. Moses was in holy ground. He was doing what he was supposed to be doing, and didn't even realize that everything that he needed for where God was taking him, for, because God was telling him to throw the rod on the ground. Everything he needed was in his hand already. Everything he needed for where God was calling him and taking him was in his hand. It was inside of him, and that was because of training ground, the holy ground, So basically what I'm getting at, just don't despise the holy ground. And also, it talks about more things, and I wrote, God was providing him with everything he will need. Literally. Like, I don't even know how to explain. I just feel like you either get it or you don't. Okay, but just don't despise holy ground. Don't despise the training ground, because it's preparing you for where God is calling you. Moses had the staff, and literally it was in his hand, and it had something to do with what God was telling him to do. What God was calling him to do. So everything you need, half the time, it's in your hand. It's in you. Stop doubting yourself. Do what God called you to do. Stop making excuses. Stop downplaying yourself. Stop letting the devil trick you out your spot. Stop letting discouragement get to you. Everything God, and that's another thing, everything God is calling you towards, you feel a push, God is calling you towards that, God is pulling you to do that, God is leading, telling you to do this. Don't doubt yourself. Everything you need is in your hand already. Everything you need is in you already. What you waiting on? That's something I had to realize before. I actually didn't realize. I feel like I realized in the middle of writing my book, but beforehand, I didn't even know. I didn't think I could write my book. I procrastinated for a while, and God kept bringing it to my attention. I didn't think that I could do it, and it took me to realize that it's in me. It's everything I need is in my hand, literally. Even if it's this in your hand, everything you need is in here. What you waiting on? Like, if God is calling you to do something, it's time to move. You get what I'm saying? Respond. Moses' response and recognition leads to a revelation and calling on his life. Don't miss what God is calling you to. But anyways, yeah. I have a few more notes in here, I think. basically, what you're doing now is significant. Don't hate holy ground. But yeah, I really encourage you to go read, to go watch the sermon. I'm going to link it down below because I want y'all to hear him preach it. I'm just giving y'all notes I have and going by the word and what's in my heart. But I really want y'all to, the notes from the sermon. But I really want y'all to go watch the sermon for yourself because it fed me so much. And it's just one of those sermons that I won't ever forget. So, yeah.